Hi, I'm Dave Skudis, Watershed Manager at the Mile High Flood District. I'm going to talk about a system of open channels we built back in 2016 in the boundary area between Louisville and Lafayette. Here are some photos, courtesy of Dave Crickmom and Olson, of this lovely area. There were some lessons learned on this project that I will be sharing with you today. We built the project in two phases with two different contractors, giving us the unique opportunity to compare two low-bid contractors side by side on the same project simultaneously. We documented that experience like an academic exercise, and I'll share that story later on. The primary goal of the project was to reduce flood risk to downtown Louisville, to take the flood risk from this down to this. We had to tear into all of the city streets highlighted in yellow in order to build a 100-year storm drain system to capture stormwater and get it to the open space on the other side of Highway 42. And then we either built or enlarged the open channels through the open space to convey water around 1 mile downstream to Coal Creek. Many of you watching this presentation are familiar with the district's Project Partners procurement process. For those that are not familiar, we use a relationship-based project delivery process that relies on multidisciplined design and construction teams with high levels of trust. It most closely resembles a CMGC contract. We do similar work year after year, and we find great value in the long-term relationships we've formed with our design and construction professionals. So our process does not involve open, low-bid contracting. Basing your contractor selection only on the lowest initial bid basically implies that all contractors are interchangeable, and the only distinguishing feature we care about is their initial bid. I say initial because you never know how much a project really costs until it's done. The experience we had on this project perfectly demonstrates that there is value in a contractor well beyond their initial bid price. There are other values that matter, values that are sometimes hard to measure. On this project, there were two fairly distinct types of work. There was the retrofit storm drain in downtown Louisville and the open channel work through the open space. As I mentioned earlier, property acquisition near the open space was challenging, so it took a while. In downtown Louisville, one of the biggest constraints was schedule. Louisville has a really popular farmers market each summer, starting at the end of May. We had a deadline of May 27th to get the area finished enough for the farmers market to open. For these reasons, we broke the project into two phases, so the downtown work wouldn't have to wait on the property acquisition. Louisville received a grant through the state's revolving fund. These are federally sourced dollars, so this drove our project delivery process. In short, this meant we had to use an open, low bid for contractor selection, with Louisville being the contracting agency. So we bid the two project phases separately, and the phases were awarded to two different contractors. We'll call them Contractor 1 and Contractor 2, or Number 2, as I like to call them. For various reasons I won't get into, the two projects ended up starting at the same time, so we had the rare opportunity to compare two contractors who were working side by side on the same project simultaneously. And let me tell you, we had very different experiences with these two. Put more bluntly, Contractor 1 was great. They're one of the district's on-call contractors. Number 2 was horrible. We had issues galore: personnel, quality, safety, schedule, everything. The contrast was stark enough that we decided to quantify the differences in any way we could think of. Mark Schutte, who's now at the district, was the consultant in the field helping us with construction. Mark wrote a short but well-written report to document our findings. So here are a few highlights of the quantifiable comparisons between the two contractors. From a personnel standpoint, and I love that meme, every one of Number 2's people that attended the pre-construction meeting quit the company in the first few weeks of the project at all three of these levels. Not a good sign. Then more quit later on. Number 2 subcontractors were treated poorly. Their subs doing finish work stopped showing up, and the GC would blame the subs for anything that came up. It was all the subs' fault. The city inspector mistrusted everything the GC did, and this mistrust filtered down to the subs' work, so anything being even slightly off had to be reworked. It was a bad day to be a sub on this project. Contractor 1 had the same staff throughout, and their subs showed up. We had a lot of public complaints. Number 2 got ahead of themselves and tore up a road east of downtown, the road in that picture. It was only supposed to be closed for a month, but this stretched to 4 months as they diverted crews back to downtown to meet the farmers market deadline. People couldn't access their driveways. They had to walk a few blocks to get to their cars. They were ticked. And then number 2's workers were caught a few times helping themselves to garden hoses from people's homes when they needed water. These complaints got directed to the ownership team. We had safety issues with number 2. Most of these had to do with their open-cut crossing of Highway 42, which you can see in the foreground of that photo. They did such a poor job with their road patching that it had to be repaved a few times, and some drivers were in danger of breaking an axle, including the city's inspector who would pass by each day on his way to work. There were numerous quality issues, and a lot of it was the easy stuff. A few quick examples. On the waterline work, we had lots of megalug fittings. These come with those blue bolts that shear off when you've torqued them enough. Well, all over the place, you'd see these megalug bolts still there when they were ready to bury the thing. With water services, they were supposed to use gate valves, and they buried them before the inspector could look at them. They said, "Oh yeah, we used the right valves." The inspector made them dig them up anyway, and sure enough, they used ball valves instead of gate valves. There were lots of change order requests. Number 2 had 3 times the number of requests than contractor number 1. Number 2 had a serious lack of professionalism. They would just bombard Mark with poorly organized paperwork and make him figure it out. So that was a lot of field orders and RFIs, lots of iterations on submittal reviews. The 2 overtime requests from number 2 were for weekend work they needed to meet the farmers market deadline. The deadline was May 27th. They had it ready no sooner than the end of day on May 27th. So yeah, they were paving the road on the last day possible. When it came to pay applications, we couldn't trust any of the quantities number 2 would submit. Poor Mark earned an honorary CPA keeping track of them. He developed a strong bond with his survey wheel, painstakingly checking quantities each month. And then at one point, number 2 claimed 20 to 30% extra quantity on the asphalt, which of course they didn't bring up before or during the paving, but a few weeks later. Their approach was to toss us a bunch of stuff, and then we had to do the work to disprove it. So number 2 generated over double the number of emails per day than number 1, and of course this all leads to more money we had to pay for Mark's time. There were other projects in the area that were waiting on number 2's work. Number 2 took so long in getting things done, we eventually deducted over $450,000 worth of work from their contract and awarded it to adjacent contractors who we trusted. When it came to releasing retainage, this got held up by claims from subcontractors. We held the retainage until we had proof that the subs had been paid. And here's an email from one of the subs number 2 needed a release from. I'll give you a dramatic reading of this. "Here's the form you were needing to get your money from the city. We were just needing to make sure blank didn't screw us out of any other money like the concrete work we did for you guys at the Louisville job. Pretty funny how all of a sudden your phone and email works when you want to check. That feeling sucks, doesn't it, when you cannot get an answer from anyone and you're trying to get paid. Hopefully you won't screw over any other subcontractors again. Have a good day." Sometimes sarcasm can be hard to read in an email. This is not one of those times. Okay, so my reason for sharing this story, it was a unique opportunity to compare 2 contractors. There is a lot of value in having a good contractor that can be hard to quantify. But here you can see measurable differences in personnel, safety, quality, public complaints, and even cost when you look at all of Mark's time, his extra time we had to pay for. For anyone in the owner role watching this, hopefully this is something you could use for justification if you're looking to convince folks in your organization to use a process other than an open low bid. If you email me, I'd be happy to send you a copy of the report this presentation was based on. It's the best 4-page report you'll ever read. And of course, the book I've written, The Effective Client, is also a great resource for this same topic. This was by and large a very successful project. We accomplished what we set out to do. But as with most projects of this size, it wasn't perfect, and I hope the lessons we learned will be useful to you on one of your future projects.